In 67 BCE, Judea once again collapsed into civil war. 9 years earlier, Queen Alexandra had appointed her elder son Hyrcanus as high priest, while making her younger son, Aristobulus, heir apparent to the throne, finally ending the political crisis over the separation of religion and state. But then two things happened. First, Aristobulus became the champion of the Sadducees, Alexandra's deposed political rivals who had caused the Judean civil war 20 years earlier. The ruling Pharisees, meanwhile, had threatened to ally with foreign nations if their power was ever threatened again. So Alexandra had Aristobulus disinherited. With her death in 67 BCE, Hyrcanus II was both king and high priest. Judea's political order had come full circle. But it gets worse. Throughout the Mithridatic Wars, Alexandra and the Pharisees' reliance on foreign mercenaries had earned the enmity of Judea's top general, Antipater the Idumean. Antipater was of Edomite ancestry. His parents had been among those forcibly converted to Judaism during the reign of Hyrcanus I. While these Edomite converts had full Jewish citizenship, there was still a cultural stigma against them which made assimilation difficult. Antipater turned this to his advantage from a young age, gaining the trust of other minority groups in Judea, swelling the ranks of the Judean army with a population that was more loyal to him than to the crown or the temple. 3 months into Hyrcanus' reign, Antipater joined forces with Prince Aristobulus and besieged Jerusalem until Hyrcanus agreed to abdicate. Antipater had favored Aristobulus because he was more headstrong and militaristic. He advised the newly minted king to have his brother executed. But Aristobulus was not the tyrant that Antipater had imagined, and instead let his brother go free. By having his advice ignored, Antipater now became paranoid that Aristobulus would have him killed. Suddenly, the soft-hearted Hyrcanus seemed much more appealing, and over the next 2 years, Antipater conspired with the deposed king to take back the throne. Antipater was married to a noblewoman from the Arab kingdom of Nabatea, and in 64 BCE, he used her connections to visit the Nabatean court at Petra, promising to return all of the territory Alexander Yanai had conquered from Nabatea over the previous decades in exchange for an army to take Jerusalem. The Nabatean king, Aretas III, agreed, and in April, 50,000 Arab soldiers surrounded Jerusalem. Most of the Judean army welcomed Antipater, opening the western gates and letting the Nabateans into the city. Now, this happened to be Passover, which meant that the temple treasury was full and that tens of thousands of people had brought animals into the city to be sacrificed. Fearing that these animals would now be used to feed the Nabatean army, Aristobulus began pouring silver coins over the walls of the Temple Mount, offering the money for every head of cattle brought for sacrifice. But the citizens refused to honor this deal, instead taking the money for themselves. It appeared that the siege would be over in a matter of days, but as spring gave way to summer, Jerusalem was pounded by the great Hamsin, severe sandstorms from the east, forcing everyone to hunker down and pause the fighting. At the same time all of this was happening, the Mithridatic Wars were not over. The Roman general Scaurus had just captured Syria from the Armenians, and soon after received ambassadors from both Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. Both ambassadors offered Scaurus 400 silver talents in exchange for Roman assistance. Scaurus chose to ally with Aristobulus, since he still controlled the temple and thus was more likely to pay. Upon his arrival in Jerusalem, Scaurus ordered the Nabateans to withdraw under threat of Roman invasion, ending the siege. But this did not end the civil war. Since the Nabatean invasion, the Pharisees had rallied around Hyrcanus, and the stalemate continued. But with the arrival of a new year, the Mithridatic Wars finally ended, and the Roman general Pompey the Great arrived in Damascus, fresh off his final cleanup operations in the Caucasus. Now, before going forward, I want to give an extra special thanks to the YouTube channel Historia Civilis. Historia Civilis is a channel which uses lots of maps and diagrams to explain historical events, with a primary focus on this exact period of the Roman Republic. While his videos haven't yet put much focus on Judea, Historia Civilis' creator was personally very helpful in explaining the Roman side of the story to me. So go check out his channel if you like this one, and consider the rest of this episode a kind of crossover. With Pompey in Damascus, Aristobulus and Hyrcanus again sent ambassadors hoping to gain Roman favor. Pompey hesitated to answer the ambassador's pleas, preferring to settle the affairs of the Nabateans first. But Aristobulus interpreted this as an act of hostility, and took his army to prepare for a siege at Alexandrium. This at last compelled Pompey to side with Hyrcanus and invade Judea. During the siege of Alexandrium, the Romans abstained from attacking on Shabbat. By this act, Pompey hoped to demonstrate to the Jewish people that this was not a war of conquest, and in so doing, kept their favor. Aristobulus surrendered and allowed Pompey to take Jerusalem on behalf of his brother. When the Romans arrived in Jerusalem, most of the city welcomed them. The Sadducees did not, and once more prepared for a siege of the Acra and the Temple Mount. But instead of besieging them from the west, as Antipater and the Nabateans had a year earlier, Pompey led a direct assault from the north, where the ground was higher, and after 3 months' siege, captured the northern fortress known as the Barras. From there, 2 Roman cohorts slaughtered 12,000 of the temple's defenders. Pompey then did something unthinkable. He entered the temple sanctuary, even going into the Holy of Holies. But this was only out of ignorance, as upon learning of his offense, Pompey immediately ordered the temple to be cleansed, and ensured that his soldiers would take no plunder. As a gesture of good faith, Pompey allowed Judea to annex the city of Ashkelon, which this entire time had remained part of the now defunct Seleucid Empire, in exchange for ceding some of its northern territories, which became part of a confederation of pro-Roman city-states called the Decapolis. The Decapolis, by the way, adopted a Pompeian calendar. That is, they numbered their years from the time of Pompey's Syrian campaign. True to his promise, Antipater the Idumean gave back most of the land that Alexander Yanai had conquered from Nabatea. Pompey then restored Hyrcanus to power, but only as ethnarch, not as king, and his direct authority was limited to the Judean heartland, with the rest of the country under Roman occupation. In all his interactions with the Jews, Pompey had only dealt with Antipater, and wanted to make clear that he was the real power behind the throne. Though it should be noted that these were only temporary measures until the line of succession could be untangled. If Hyrcanus died without an heir, Judea would be automatically annexed by Rome, which nobody wanted. And if multiple claimants disputed the throne, the Romans could supposedly declare war on their behalf and annex the kingdom through conquest. To prevent either of these things, Hyrcanus' daughter married Aristobulus' son. Their daughter, Mariamne, was then designated as heir. But for the time being, Antipater held sway over Judea. He began as a devoted Pompeian, but a not inconsiderable rift between the two men opened when Pompey's confederate Crassus pillaged the Jewish temple on his way to total annihilation by the Parthians at Carrhae. When civil war broke out between Pompey and Julius Caesar, and it became clear that Pompey would lose, Antipater switched sides. To make his intentions absolutely clear, Antipater raised an entire legion to assist Caesar against Ptolemy in the Battle of the Nile. In response, Caesar made Antipater a Roman citizen. When Caesar was assassinated, however, the assassin Cassius came to Judea to exact tribute. Antipater begrudgingly gave him this tribute, a betrayal of the late Roman hero that resulted in his own assassination. But not before Antipater secured his family line by arranging a marriage between Princess Mariamne and his own son, an up-and-coming general. Mariamne would never be queen. Special thanks to my patrons, including Galneat level patron Vicky Nelson. If you like this video, you can also donate via Patreon link below. You can also check out my book, An Armada of Cats Travels in Israel, along with links to my sources for this video. Otherwise, you can always like, share, and subscribe. I will see you next time.